Hi, I'm Professor Jensen, and today we're going to be talking about deliverable number 1, the manual deployment of jwt-pizza. So in this deliverable, we're going to fork the jwt or jwt-pizza repository. We're going to build it locally in our development environment, and then we're going to push it out to GitHub Pages so that we can do a static hosting of that front-end code. The instructions all here, but we're going to do this in 5 steps with one bonus starting step just to make sure we're all on the same page and starting in the same place. So to start off, our bonus step is to make sure that we forked the jwt-pizza repository from the class repository into your GitHub account. After that, we're going to create a branch in that repository called JH or GitHub Pages, and we're going to use that as the source of our static deployment for the GitHub Pages. We're going to then associate that branch with the GitHub Pages functionality in GitHub. The third step is that we're going to deploy just a simple file, a single HTML index.html file into that branch and just make sure that it's actually deploying the static files properly. After that, we're going to associate our domain name with the GitHub Pages repository so that we're not using the default kind of funky path one, but instead we can actually use one that is more meaningful and direct. And then the final step is to then bundle up the jwt-pizza code using Vite and then insert that into our branch and deploy it to our static website using GitHub Pages. With that, we're all done, and you've done a manual deployment of your jwt-pizza repository to GitHub Pages. So let's jump right in. The first thing we want to do is actually make sure that we have forked the class repository. So I'm going to go ahead and head on over there to the class repository. This is the URL right here for the account, and then I can just go to repositories and look at all of them here. And the one I want is jwt-pizza. Hit that one and grab the URL. And, oops, sorry, don't want to grab the URL. I actually want to fork it. So I'm going to push the fork button. I'm going to tell it to put into my test account, which is BYUCS student, and tell it to create it with the name that's default, jwt-pizza, and go ahead and create that fork. So now if I head back over to my account and refresh this page, you'll see I've actually got a jwt-pizza account in here. So if I click on that, I've got everything, looks fine, straight from the source code in the course repository. So now I'm going to clone that repository and copy it down locally using my command console. So I'm going to do a git clone and paste in that URL. Then once that's copied down, I'm going to change directories into that. And I can actually test at this point to make sure it's working right. Let's go ahead and do that. So I can do an npm install, and then I can do an npm run dev. And that will bring up Vite and actually create a little debugger HTTP service there. And so I can open it up and see that I can locally actually, and this is what we're shooting for, to actually get it off from our development environment and publish it into our production environment hosted as the static files on GitHub Pages. So when we're done, we should get the same thing with the actual URL for pointing to GitHub Pages. Okay, so we're good there. I'm going to go back over here, close down the Vite debugger, and we're ready to actually start following the steps to deploy our pages there. So the first thing I want to do is create a GitHub Pages branch within the repository. So I'm going to go back over to my forked repository here. I'm going to click on the branches, and I'm going to push new branch. And it's important you call it the correct name. This is kind of a default name or magic name that GitHub looks for pages. So I'm going to call it GH Pages and go ahead and create that branch. And with that in place, now we can go back to our instructions. And we're ready to do the next step, which is we're going to associate that branch with the GitHub Pages functionality. So if I travel back to my repository, go over to Settings, click on Pages, and look at the GitHub Pages information. Now, by default, it might actually be already correct, which it is in my case here, but just make sure that the settings are correct. So the first option you want to look at is your build and deployment and where you want to pull those files from to actually host in GitHub Pages. So right now it's set to deploy from branch, which is what we want. We just created that GH branches page branch that we're going to use. The other option is to GitHub Actions. That's actually where we're going to change it to later when we actually start using CI scripts to actually deploy. But for right now, we just want to do it to the branch. The second thing you want to check is which branch that you're actually deploying from. And by default, it's selecting GH Pages, which is exactly what we want. So we just want to make sure that that's set there. So with that in place, I should be able to like refresh this page now, and you'll see that it says, hey, my site is live at this URL. So it's just the default GitHub Pages with the repository name at the end as the path. But what it's hosting there is the source code for jwt-pizza, and we don't want the source code, we want the bundled representation. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to create just a simple static file, an index.html with just a basic message in it to show that we can actually deploy to that branch, and it will show up statically hosted on GitHub Pages. So that's our next step here. We've got that associated, and we're ready to create our static deployment. So what we have to do is we created that branch up on GitHub's repository. Now we need to clone that branch down locally into our dev environment so that we can mess around with it and commit those changes. So I'm going to fetch the information for that first by doing a fetch origin. So we're pulling it from GitHub down into our local environment. So I'm going to just paste that command right here. And you can see that it created the new branch. It has the new branch information, but if I actually do like a git branch -L, which lists all the branch, it won't have that listed there because I've just fetched it. I haven't actually pulled it into the repo yet. And that's what this next step is going to do here. Is it's going to check out that branch and it's going to populate it with the information that we got from the origin. So I'm going to pull that in there. Now if we do our branch list again, we can see that we not only have the new branch in there, the GitHub Pages branch, but that it's actually checked out and ready to go on that. So we're all set. So the instructions then say, once you've got that there, we just want to delete all the files there, because remember, that's the source code to the website. It's not actually the bundled static website itself. So we're just going to blow all that code away and replace it with a simple static page, which just says hello to GitHub Pages. So I'm going to copy this command here so we can whack everything that's in that directory. If I do a listing right now, you'll see I've got lots. And then I run this, it warns me that I really want to do it. I say yes, and now if I do my listing again, you can see there's nothing in there. And that's not actually true. If I do an ls-list all, then I'll actually see that there are still some hidden files, my git repo information, which I don't want to delete, and also my git ignore. So I don't check in things that I don't mean to actually. So it just deleted all the non-hidden files at that point. So now I can go ahead and create my new index.html file. Let's make it a little more fancy by putting a bold around GitHub, because GitHub, is cool. Putting that there. And then we can go ahead and add that and commit it up to the branch and push it up there. And that should go into our GitHub Pages and actually be rendered as our static deployment. So I'm going to do git add to add all the files we have there. If I do a git status at this point, it'll say, hey, I've deleted a bunch of files and we've got like, one modified file. That's when we replace the index.html. So that's good. So then we can do our git commit, and we can do just initial check-in at that point. Then I can do my git push to push those files up there. And if I head on back over to my my repository as represented in GitHub, go to my code, go onto my branch, which is my GitHub Pages branch, you'll see now that it's not just a branch of the root of main anymore, but it's actually just got my index.html. If I go look at that file, it's got that file right there. So now if I head back over to Pages, you'll see my links there, and if we go visit it, we're going to see the actual inner output of the HTML file that we created there with the the bolded GitHub. So that works great. We've completed those steps there. The next step is to assign a custom domain. So in order to do that, I've got to go over to my DNS provider, and in my case, I'm using Route 53 and AWS. And I'm just going to go add a new record in here that points my domain or my subdomain that I want to point to the GitHub hosting environment. So I'm going to create a new record. I want it to be pizza. And this is going to go to pizza.byucsstudent.click. I want it to be a C record, just an alias over into GitHub. So if I go here, and then we're going to redirect that to my account name within GitHub, which is byucsstudent.github, and make sure it's IO and not com. IO is their GitHub Pages representation. .com is where all the repos actually are. Then I should be set. Let's make sure I've got that right within the instruction going on here. So it says create that with the subdomain of pizza. Make sure you do that. And then you're going to replace your account name in GitHub here instead of this little stub one that we're using as a demonstration. So with that in place, I should be able to create the record. I can verify that it's actually there. If I pull this out a bit, check that it's pizza is the subdomain, and it's actually going to GitHub there. That looks great. Okay, and I can make sure that works right too if I use like the dig command. So if I do like dig pizza.mydomain there, and then I look at the answer section, it's saying that it's taking it from the pizza subdomain over into BYU CS student. That looks perfect. So in theory, I should be able to come back over to my pages. And if I visit this URL right now, then I'll see that that's still there. So what we want to do is actually now use our custom domain, which is coming down to this setting right here. And so now we're going to set it to pizza.byucsstudent.click. Push the save button. And it's going to actually verify. So it's going to go look at the DNS name or the DNS record and make sure that you have associated it with GitHub. That way it proves that, yeah, you with this domain name actually want it to be to that, because I'm able to make the changes within the repo and also set the DNS record. That gives pretty good proof that this is exactly what we want. And I just want to, .click. Awesome. So DNS check was successful. Notice it changed the URL on here. So now if I go visit again, we'll actually see that it's on my subdomain using the CNAME to alias over into GitHub, and I still might see my name. So I'm going to get rid of the old URL, the static one, and from now on we're going to be using this one. So that's awesome. We're getting really close here. So the next step is to actually bundle up our jwt-pizza code and deploy that instead of that really simple index.html file. So in order to do that, we're going to follow these steps of, first of all, checking out the main and building our bundle. The next step we'll do is we'll do a little tweak here that I'll explain in a minute, which makes it so the DOM routing works right. And then we're just going to change into the GitHub Pages branch, blow away the index.html we put there, and put our bundled files into that root directory, and then just push them up into our branch of the GitHub deployment, and it should just automatically load. And if we did everything right, it will look just like that when we're done. Okay, so let's start with our checkout here. Coming in, we're checking out main again. I'm going to do an npm, and I'm just going to do a CI, which is basically an install, just a little more efficient one, just to make sure I've got everything there. And then I'm going to do an npm run build to create our bundle using Vite. And when that's done, I should be able to do a list, and I've got a dist directory. So if I list the dist directory, there's all my bundled files right in there. So that's good. Our first steps are done there. Now I'm going to make a copy of the index.html file and call it 404.html. This is kind of a hack how GitHub does this. If GitHub gets a request for a page that it doesn't know of, that's not actually in your branch code, then it's going to display a magic file named 404.html. And the reason we're copying the index.html to that is because the DOM router is actually in the index.html JavaScript that's loaded up there. So if that file isn't there for whatever path you go to, then it won't know how to do the DOM routing. So if you have a sub path on your URL to like go to your orders or your about page, and you refresh, then it's going to try and find that literal path in your browser, and it won't find it. So it will grab this 404 HTML file and instead load up the DOM router, which is now represented by the index.html content, and it will be able to enact and know how to interpret that path according to the DOM routing rules and continue to work fine. So that's the whole point of this little kludge right here. Put that in there, and then we need to check out the GitHub Pages branch, delete the files that are in there right now, and copy in the bundled Vite distribution file of our static website. So I'm going to go ahead and check out there. I don't actually have to delete anything because this is the first time we've done it. My dist directory and my node modules are going to be ignored by the .getignore file, and I'm going to overwrite my index.html with the files that are in dist. So I'm just going to go ahead and skip that step right now. If you'd done like multiple iterations of this with different builds, you'd want to make sure you cleared out whatever you had in there before. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. Now if I do my listing, I've got a whole ton of files actually in here. That all looks great. And I'm going to do a get add to add all these new files in here. If I do my get status, then you'll see it's got all those added in there. One of them's modified it. We replaced our index.html, and then we added all the other static resources that Vite created for us. And then we can go ahead and commit it. So git commit, that's the am, and we're going to do our deploy. This is version 1, and we should be good to go if I do our git push. Oh, so I got one little error here. This is saying that I've actually got something up on GitHub that I don't have locally. So if I do like a git log here, you'll see that I'm not up to date with what's actually up on the GitHub repository. So I'm going to do a git pull first here. And now if I do my git log again, now I'm good. And you'll see what I was missing was this CNAME file. When I set the CNAME up in the GitHub Pages, it actually created this file called CNAME. So it can remember for this branch that actually has been validated. So I had to pull that down before I could push. So that's fine. So now I can go ahead and do a git push. And we're off and running. That all worked fine. If I head back over to GitHub and go and look at my code, you'll see that I've gone from, on the branch, on the GitHub branch, see that I've gone from that single index.html file to the actual bundle files. And notice this is also different. Like these bundle files are different than what's actually in the main branch because the GitHub Pages branch is the bundled files and the main directory is the source code for that. But we should be all set. I should be able to come back over here now to pizza.byucsstudent.click. Sometimes this takes a little while for it to actually figure out that there's new files to deploy. You got to work through the caching of it. But if we did everything right and the caching's already cleared up, I should be able to push the refresh button here and voila, sometimes things work great. And there's our pizza service being loaded here. I can validate that it's actually working if I go to an order page. If I hit the refresh button, my 404.html should work and that shouldn't freak out the DOM router, and it doesn't. So I know I'm good to go. I can go ahead and order a pizza and enjoy the awesomeness thereof. Let's just make sure we got all our steps completed. So our app is rendering and we can see that we are going to get 70% for deploying from the GitHub Pages branch and that the complete functionality using our custom domain is actually working. Check, check, life is good. Thanks for watching.